Russians intensifying sabotaging the Russian army, which will only make things worse for the Russian forces, who already cannot advance basically anywhere. And because of this, it is assumed that they might collect everything they have left for one final attack, and in case this fails as well, which obviously it will, the retribution of Ukraine will be swift and successful. And to devastate Putin even more, Ukrainians allegedly want to switch the order of the liberation, which basically means that we might see Ukrainians retaking Crimean Peninsula much sooner. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And in this first video, we can see a Ukrainian helicopter pilot operating his machine. Next we go allegedly somewhere to the south of Ukraine, and as you can see from this video, Ukrainians stole another S-300 missile system from Russians. And this video only once again confirms the state of Russia as one of the main weapon sponsors to Ukraine. Next we have a picture of a shrapnel which was released from the buttocks of Dmitry Rogozin, and it basically shows the size of this piece of metal. Most likely, the next time Senior Rogozin is gonna talk about this case among his friends and relatives, he's gonna say that this piece of metal was massive. But as we all already know, the majority of men, they like to over-exaggerate, and I'm not just talking about the size of the shrapnel. But to make things even more ridiculous for Dmitry Rogozin, he decided to send this piece of metal to the President of France Emmanuel Macron as a proof of war crimes of NATO. And I guess in his mind, this does justify whatever Russia is doing against Ukraine. But okay, because right now let's go to Rostov-on-Don, which is located in Russia. And as you can see from this video, the Russian air defense system has been activated earlier last day. And at the same time, some locals reported that they saw Iskander missiles flying towards Ukraine. Our next stop brings us to another distant location inside Russia, the city of Tomsk. And as you can see from this video, which unfortunately I had to blur, there was a fire inside the 10th city of Russian conscripts. According to the Russian side, the reason for this fire was a short circuit, but at the same time some people mention that somebody once again was just smoking in inappropriate place. But to be honest, if you think about this 10th city is located in the middle of the field. It is winter, it is pretty wet and cold outside. That is why the such ignition, it's not gonna happen without a reason. Which basically means we potentially might have a sign of a small diversion. And speaking about diversions and sabotage, according to the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, since the beginning of this year, such activities increased dramatically inside Russia. Such as, for example, this video, which came to us from deep within Russia, from Krasnoyarsk, where we can see that somebody tampered with the rail tracks. Since the beginning of 2023, this is at least the 6th reported case of people sabotaging the Russian army from within. And as a result of this, a lot of military trains bringing the resupplies to the front lines have been delayed, which, as you might already guess, makes the situation for Russians even worse. This is just one of the pieces of the puzzle of the total ultimate counteroffensive of Ukraine, and as soon as we have the full picture, this is when the chain reaction, the domino effect, will begin. And if you don't want to miss these events, which will inevitably lead to the Ukrainian victory, just please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and force me to post stories, so you can, I guess, see how I live. Alright, and before I talk about another puzzle piece, the complete exhaustion of the Russian army, allow me to give you a very quick update from the south. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians indeed did establish and gain a foothold on Veliki Potemkin Island, about which we're talking about my previous episode. As for now, pretty much the only thing that we have is that video from yesterday where Ukrainian soldier installed the Ukrainian flag on this island. But some media sources claim that Ukraine was able to establish the full control over this island. However, this information has not been yet confirmed by the General Staff of Ukraine. But what we do know is that Ukrainians continue to send reconnaissance groups on the other side of Dnipro river, creating a chaos for the Russian soldiers. Additionally, Ukrainians conducted high-precision attacks against Russian military bases in Kostorizhevo and Velikokopatne, located to the southeast of Oleshki. And at the same time, even more attacks have been performed against Russian clusters located in Vasilivka, Tokmak and Polokhy. Both of these attacks inflicted visible losses, which basically means in the near future we might see the resurrection of the activity on the front lines. And then ultimately, right here we have a video from Vasilivka which shows that Ukrainians were able to destroy a Russian military commandment office. Alright, and now let me give you the same quick update from the east, as well as some unsettling details from Bakhmut. And first of all, according to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians continued their counteroffensive in order to regain their lost positions along Svatovo-Kreminny road, while the main focus of Ukrainians was to disrupt the logistics of Russians in Luhansk region. At the same time, it looks like that at this point the main goal of Russians in the east, in the areas such as Bakhmut and Avdiivka, is to do everything possible to prevent Ukrainians from advancing, which pretty much supports the previously made claims that the Russian offensive in the east has almost completely exhausted and it's near its culmination. At the same time, in the last 24 hours, the heaviest fighting has been recorded in Solidar and Klishchinivka. And then right here we have a picture from Makiyivka, which shows us the destroyed Russian military base, which resulted in anywhere between 50 to 600 Russian soldiers being lost. And even though the eastern front line might seem like it came to a complete stalemate, still the heaviest fighting and the heaviest situation, according to Zaluzhny, remains in Bakhmut area. The number of bodies, according to Valery Zaluzhny, is just so many that Russians are no longer able to carry them to the back. That is why they do use them as defensive structures. And while this might be true or just to be a wishful thinking, I, for obvious reasons, am not able to verify these claims. But in case they are true, just imagine the horrific pictures people see every day on both sides of this war in Bakhmut. And nevertheless, Russians continue to focus their attention in the east primarily around this city. I guess they just wanted so much to at least present some kind of victory to the Russian people. And then, as we go all the way to the north, to the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, we have a video which is a security footage which shows the destruction of a hotel, which happened a couple of days ago. Just like some previous photos and videos in this episode, I had to blur this video due to ongoing demonetization on YouTube. For this reason, I uploaded some of the uncensored versions on my Discord, and the rest will be available on my Patreon. And if you want to financially support the channel, the links will be down below. So pretty much yes, at this very moment, Russia realizes that the best they can do is to stall this war. But at the same time, they perfectly know that this stalemate only benefits Ukraine. And that is why they might attempt one final push with everything they have, such as for example the invasion from the north against Kiev, Kharkov and Rivne, about which we were talking about in one of my previous episodes. And if they fail there as well, I guess you can already assume what's about to happen. And we indeed already have the earliest signs about Russians gathering their forces for another major attack, such as for example Russian reconnaissance plane Il-76 once again arrived in Belarus. And the main purpose of this plane, with my limited knowledge in exactly how it works, is to collect the intelligence data of the location of the enemy's targets through, I guess, sending the radio waves. At the same time, according to the representative of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Vadim Skibitsky, Russia is expecting a brand new supply of Iranian drones. It is yet uncertain how many drones Iran will send, but it is estimated to be anywhere between 250 and 300 items. And speaking about their own supplies, according to once again Vadim Skibitsky, Russia is only able to produce approximately 50 caliber and X-11 missiles per month. And that is why, as it was pretty much obvious since the very beginning, the only last chance for Russia to change this war is to create the stalemate, regroup, resupply themselves, and then attack once again, most likely in a final push. Which is pretty much also confirmed by the President Zelensky, who also thinks that right now Russia is gathering everything they have for one final attack. And the goal of Ukraine with its Western partners is to strengthen its defense and to prevent this from happening. And one of the key turning points in this war might be the arrival of the missile defense system Patriot to Ukraine. Because whenever Russia inevitably fails in its ultimate offensive and then Ukraine starts retaking and liberating its own territories, it obviously expects the revenge by Russians. And that is why the high-end defense systems, such as above-mentioned Patriot, is extremely needed so that the liberation of Ukrainians can become unaffected. And so, what do we have at this very moment? What are these puzzle pieces of Ukrainian victory? First of all, we obviously have the exhausted and demoralized Russian army. Second, it is Ukraine which only continues to receive life-changing weapons. Third are once again Russians who only continue to sabotage the Russian army from the inside. Fourth are once again Ukrainians who ruin the reputation of the Russian army as the second army of the world. And that is why they are no longer afraid to attack them even on their own territories. The puzzle right here is almost complete with only the last final missing piece, which is another massive failure by the Russian army, which very well might become this invasion attempt from the north. And as soon as this happens, this is when Ukraine will launch its ultimate counteroffensive. And according to the Chief of Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, this might happen approximately in March, which might be the hottest month of the year. This is when the ultimate liberation across the entire front line, all the way from Crimea to Donbass, will begin. And probably this will begin by Ukrainians liberating the rest of Mykolaiv region, Kherson region, and even a part of Zaporozhye region, including Melitopol. And since Ukrainians will be able to put their artillery and HIMARS closer to the borders with Crimea, this will most likely put this peninsula next on the list. Whenever Kirill Budanov was asked whether he is afraid to attack Crimea due to the response by Russians, he said that no, Ukraine is not afraid, because this territory was illegally annexed by Russians back in 2014, and Ukraine can use any weapons they want on their own territory. Budanov then also said that Ukraine is not ready to give up any inch of its territory, and it will restore its borders as of 1991. And like mentioned previously, one of the biggest indirect victories of Ukraine in this war is that they were able to destroy this stereotype of a strong Russian army, which basically means no one else in the world, including especially Ukraine, is no longer afraid of them. It is even estimated by the Admiral Blizhan that Russia has lost approximately 60% of its tanks, 40% of armored personnel carriers, and 70% of its missiles. Which basically means that the last remaining influence of the Russian government that they still have are their nuclear weapons, which are hopefully their empty threats. And the most interesting part in this whole situation is that the liberation order might change, and Crimea will be liberated much sooner. Because according to Dmitry Gordon, who is extremely close to the Ukrainian authorities and military representatives, it is much easier to liberate Crimea right now rather than Donbass. And according to him, in fact, the first major city which might be liberated will be Melitopol, and then Ukraine will liberate the rest of Mykolaiv and Kherson regions. And after this is exactly when Ukrainians will start moving closer to the borders with Peninsula, bringing their weapons and equipment, which is pretty much exactly the same assumptions I've been making for the last month. And as a result of this, the entire peninsula will be in range for Ukrainian attacks. That is why Dmitry Gordon was already suggesting the people of Russia living on this peninsula to start selling their houses and leaving Crimea as soon as possible. Because whenever Ukraine liberates its territories, all the sales of the real estate will be considered illegal, and therefore they'll be transferred to Ukrainian ownership. And right now I'm just not sure whether this was just a coincidence or not, but right here we have a video of regular Russian people trying to leave the Crimean peninsula, and there's a big traffic jam in front of Crimean bridge. And reportedly, the majority of these people bring a lot of luggage with them, which almost seems like they're leaving the peninsula forever. As you can see, the year of 2023 promises to be full of good events and news, and if you don't want to miss them as soon as they start happening, just please once again subscribe to my channel. It only takes one click. And if you want to support my work due to ongoing demonetization, please consider becoming my channel member, use the PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you'll receive early access to the additional content. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.